Did you know that Keir Hardie, the founder of the Labour Party in Britain, was a very strong supporter of India's freedom struggle? This may come as a surprise to a lot of people in India because in India in the 21st century in particular, the Labour Party in Britain has been associated not so much with India's causes, and often Labour has spoken with a lot of concern about the Kashmir issue, which India has made clear is not an international issue but an internal issue. But Keir Hardie, who supported, and why am I talking about Keir Hardie today? I'm speaking in the year 2024, when Britain has got a new Prime Minister. He is a Labour politician. His name is Keir Starmer. He takes the same name as Keir Hardie, and in fact, Starmer's mother, who was a nurse, named him after Keir Hardie, who was the founder of the Labour Party. Hardie was one of the most prominent British politicians at the start of the 20th century. He grew up as a coal miner, grew up in a working class neighborhood, and understood the struggles of the poor and the underprivileged. Perhaps that is why he identified with the Indians who were at that time under the thumb of the British Raj and trying to free themselves from the British Raj. Keir Hardie started talking about India in the British Parliament in the first decade of the 20th century. For example, in the year 1906, he made strong speeches in the British Parliament on the question of India. He said that the Indians were getting very poor wages from the British Raj. He said that the death rates of Indians were unacceptable, and he said that the Indians deserved justice. This was at a time when the British Empire took tremendous pride in the fact that it was ruling India and it considered India a jewel in the crown. Hardie, however, identified himself with the Indians, and in particular, he identified himself closely with Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who was then the most prominent leader of the Indian struggle for freedom. This was the pre-Mahatma Gandhi era, and it was Tilak who was the number one leader of Indians. Tilak, in fact, transformed the Indian National Congress from being a mere debating society which was making prayers and petitions to the British Raj, and he started demanding rights. He started talking of freedom. He started demanding freedom, pushing for freedom. Tilak started saying that the British were not doing any favors by giving Indians certain concessions, and that the Indians should stop asking for concessions in the first place, because Swaraj of freedom is their birthright. Therein lies the significance of Lokmanya Tilak's statement, Swaraj is my birthright. The statement has become a cliche thanks to India's terrific textbooks, which can often put you to sleep. But freedom is my birthright is a slogan that needs to be seen in that context, because the Indians who had lost their self-confidence and who had forgotten about the values of their culture, their civilization and their society were being awakened by a mass leader like Lokmanya Tilak to a sense of their own identity and to a sense of their rights. The language of rights is familiar to all of us in the 21st century, but it was not a language that the Indians were familiar with at the start of the 20th century. And Tilak was a pioneer in awakening the Indians to their sense of identity and to a sense of their rights. So Keir Hardie, who identified himself closely with Tilak, in fact came to India in the year 1907, and he went to Pune, or Pune as it was known then, and he visited Lokmanya Tilak at his place in Pune. Hardie also visited the offices of Kesari, Tilak's famous newspaper, which was then the most prominent voice of the Indian people, and through which Tilak raised so much of awareness among the Indians. So Hardie met Tilak, had a series of meetings with him over 3 days. He visited the Kesari office and saw the newspaper offices for himself. When he went back, Hardie wrote about Tilak in the Labour Party mouthpiece, the Labour leader. And what was the occasion for writing about Tilak? The occasion was an unfortunate one as far as the Indians were concerned. The British Raj saw Tilak as a source of enormous trouble, and they booked him for sedition against the Raj, and sentenced him to 6 years in prison. He was convicted on the charge of sedition and sentenced to 6 years in prison, and he was transported to Mandalay in Burma, away from his home in Western India, all the way to Burma. 6 years of transportation, 6 years of imprisonment. And that is when Keir Hardie writes about Tilak in the Labour Mouthpiece, the Labour Leader. So Hardie wrote that there is no person in India, no leader in India who has such a hold upon the working class as Tilak, and the result of his conviction and his sentencing will be more far reaching than it would have been if any other individual had been convicted or sentenced. He also wrote, Tilak is a leader of such stature that it marks him out as a man about whom most nations would be proud. Hardie was also all praise for Tilak's academic credentials, because Tilak was not just a mass leader, he was an academician, he was a historian, he was a writer. And he did deep research into Indian history and into Indian antiquity. So Hardie wrote that Tilak is a man of considerable scholarship, and he compared his status as a scholar to that of Tchaikovsky, who was then in prison without facing any trial in Russia. He also compared Tilak to Britain's own Alfred Russel Wallace in science. And he said that I am giving you these two examples of Tchaikovsky and Wallace so that you understand the level of scholarship of the man and the manner in which he is regarded and the kind of scholarship he is capable of and that he has done so far. Hardie did not stop at that. After writing about Tilak in the Labour Mouthpiece and creating a lot of awareness across Britain, Hardie also met the then Secretary of State for India, John Morley, or Lord Morley as he was called, and he made a case to free Tilak. He wanted Tilak to be freed, and he asked Morley if Tilak could be freed because he was a good man and he was a mass leader and he was doing the right thing as far as the Indians were concerned. Hardie in fact wanted to meet Morley as part of a delegation. He wanted to take a delegation to Morley to demand the release of Tilak from Mandalay when Tilak was sent there in the year 1908. But Morley refused to accept a delegation or to see a delegation. But he agreed to meet Hardie alone. And then Hardie went and met him alone and made a case for Tilak's release. Morley, of course, did not agree to that release. But the important thing is the Labour leader Keir Hardie went there, met him and demanded Tilak's release. In this way, he contributed in his own way to India's cause for freedom and made a serious push for the release from prison of India's biggest mass leader of the pre-Gandhi era, Lokmanya Tilak. Keir Hardie was a man who stood solidly by Tilak in this hour of trial, in this period of a 6-year imprisonment in Burma, just because Tilak was voicing the aspirations of the Indian people for freedom. Hardie was a friend of India, a friend of Tilak's. And it's important to know that the founder of the Labour Party, which is in power in Britain in 2024 when I am recording this video, was a firm supporter of India's freedom struggle. Thank you. If you like this video, do subscribe to my channel and do press the bell button for notifications. This is Vaibhav Purandare signing off. See you soon.